Hey now, Adam Reaver, fu-tone.com here saying check out Nez Says. And we're live. Today is Thursday, March 18th of 2021, and you're tuned in to Nez Says, a place where musicians can get together and inspire each other to play more guitar and music. We have an amazing show today. Ben, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Dave. It was another day above freezing here in the Great White North, so I'm happy. And I'm so excited for tonight. We've got this guy, don't even get me started on the tone, the rhythms, the boogie woogie. The man oozes mojo, whether he's playing on a GNL or he's playing on some kind of cigar box thing that he's come up with that still is, again, mojo. What can I say? We've got Will Ray of the Hellicasters, Dave.
Hey, Will, how are you? Will has been a friend of mine for probably the last 10 years. I was a fan of his when he played with the Hellicasters. And then when my father, I'll tell you guys all a story. My father lives in North Carolina. And one day he says to me, hey, I had lunch with this guy. He's a guitar player. You might have heard of him. I don't know. I've never heard of him, but you ever hear of this guy, Will Ray? I'm like, from the Hellicasters? He was like, well, yeah. I'm like, yeah, he's one of the best guitar players on the planet. And those were my exact words. You had lunch with Will Ray? He was like, yeah, he's coming over. I invited him over to the house, and he's a friendly dude. I'm like, well, I would imagine he is a friendly dude. And, I would visit my dad several times a year because I'm up in New York. And, I visit him, and he's like, well, bring your guitar with you because I invited Will to come and jam in the living room. I'm like, what? So, please welcome my friend Will Ray. Hi, Will.
Thank you. I'm doing good.
Good for you.
It's I've had both my COVID shots. So
nice.
Outside of not being able to play inside due to COVID, I pretty much do the other things that I like to do. I like to go out every day. I'm not one of these that's going to lock myself in my house or anything. But yeah, it's and I have a new band I'm kind of breaking in. We don't even have a name right now, but we're streaming every other Wednesday at the Asheville Guitar Bar.
Oh,
we're
nice.
Just kind of seeing where it goes. So
yeah,
I play about as much as I like to play.
Very nice. So before we get into this, Ben, do you want to say hello to everyone in the chat?
I surely would love to. We've got headstock.
Real quick, Will, we have a live chat of people here that watch us and that ask questions and they talk to each other. And as we get questions from them for you, we'll field them and you'll be able to answer their questions. Okay.
Okay.
We've got Terry's 3Gs, Dwight Bailey, Headstock Harem, Charles Green, Pooh Ninja, Thomas Santiago, Bo Zeke. Let's see who else we have. We have Richard Nesdall in the house. Imagine that. Lurking,
Dick.
Commenting. Love it.
And no, Will just didn't call my dad a dick. That's my father's name is Dick.
Richard Nesdall.
Yes.
Exactly. Guitar Man 45's in here. We've got, if I scroll right back up in, we got Music Therapy Laz, some guy named Ben Coombs, probably an imposter. It's got to be. Dan of New Jersey. And let's see. That appears, well, let's go to the bout. Six String Brian, Lars Guitars. Welcome one, welcome all. Any questions or comments? Tag Dave or myself. Boner Jams is here.
Yeah.
This is going to be a great show. That's all I know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. So, Will, let's just start it from the very beginning. What were your very beginnings as far as listening to music? How did music get into your household? What vehicle? Who was musical in your house? What music did your parents listen to? What were your first musical interests?
Well, I had two older brothers and an older sister, and they, when I was kind of 8 or 9, you know, they started playing a lot of records around the house, and they would get into Elvis. My brother Gaylord, he was really into the folk boom of the '60s, so he was into people like Lead Belly, and as well as Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Dylan and stuff. So I can remember, I have a lot of vivid memories of just being a kid and putting together model airplanes and listening to the music going through the house. And that really influenced me quite a bit, you know. That's where I first got hooked on music.
And what drove you to the guitar?
Probably the Beatles, George Harrison, and the Beatles. And I saved all my money, and my dad said he would match funds with me. So I saved up and bought my first guitar. It was not a Silvertone or a K or something. It was a Gretsch Country Gentleman.
Of course, because you wanted to be George Harrison.
Yeah. And so that's what I kind of learned on. And I still kind of have a fondness for Gretches from that. But later on, I just kind of gravitated towards Gibsons and Fenders and stuff. So
Sure.
Sure.
Wow. Very nice. Very nice. So, all right. So you learned at a very. Did you take formal lessons, or did you have a good ear? Did you just listen to records and kind of feel your way around? What was that? How'd you do that?
probably listening to records. I always tell people, I played some in high school, but I didn't really get serious about the guitar until I got out of the Army. And when I was in Vietnam, and when I got out of the Army, first thing I did was I bought a Thorns turntable, and which had pitch on it, pitch control, and it would also go down to 16 2/3. And so that's how I learned how to play music. Is I would get records, then slow down the licks, fine tune them, to my guitar, and that's, that Thorns turntable. I call it Thorns University, because that's where I learned how to play.
Yeah, sounds good. Really cool. So, at what point did you get enough nerve to get a bunch of guys together to start your first band? And tell us about that.
When I was in high school, I was in a band called the Richmond Public Library, and it was in Richmond, Virginia, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we got into a battle of the bands with this one horn band that was really, really good, and they just beat us to a pulp, and I stayed a musician despite of that, in spite of all that, because it was kind of demeaning. But it wasn't until probably after I got out of the Army, after I'd been out for a couple of years, I got the bug again to play. And what really brought me back to music was my younger brother was going to college at Virginia Tech, and he brought home this band called the Grateful Dead, and it was their first live album, Live Dead, and I put that thing on, and just all afternoon, and finally we had an old Gibson LGO guitar laying around the house, and I
Mm-hmm.
would pick that up and just start banging away on it. It just really, the Grateful Dead really inspired me to play and to really get into it, and
Nice.
that's what I did. And from that moment on, it was just a steady stream of getting together with other musicians, you know, like-minded people, and
Mm-hmm.
you learn as you go through bands. You kind of learn, you learn that there's a lot to being in a band than just playing music. You learn all of the social aspects. You got to learn to get along with the bass player and drummer and everybody else, and you know, you just kind of learn as you go.
Yeah. So at what point did you realize, I don't really suck anymore? I'm getting pretty good at this, and when did that take place? Like, I'm getting better and more proficient at this instrument. I'd like to maybe make a go of it as a professional career. At what point did that happen?
Well, I it was a transition because I thought I could just play music for a living in Richmond, Virginia, but I learned that you really can't make a living at it, and so I had a 5 year stint of day jobs. I started at working at a foundry, you know, melting pig
Mm-hmm.
iron and making plumbing products, and then I went to um, a a glass making shop, and then my last job was working for the post office. And that job enabled me to save enough money to where uh, my bride and I, at the time, we could go to California. That became a new goal, and that's what we did. You know,
And you moved to L.A. Yes. What part of California did you move to?
say again.
What part of California did you move to?
We moved to Los Angeles, and then we
Nice.
uh, bought a house out in the valley in San Fernando Valley in Burbank, and
Mm-hmm.
I lived there for many years. So, and from there, you know, when you're in LA, you're at that moment. That's when I became a professional in 1983. When I moved there, and you know, you become a professional out of necessity. There's nothing else you want to do, and you know you got to put up or shut up, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got to be able to cut it. And so you just go on endless auditions, and you try out for different things, and uh, at any given time, I was in a total of 8 bands at once. 5 of them
Wow.
were doing showcase material, which means doing original materials that they didn't play out that much, maybe once or twice a month, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And the other 3 bands were bar bands, just to make some money and keep your chops up. And you knew you weren't going to get discovered in a bar band. So,
Right.
you know, you would be
Yeah.
discovered if you were going to be discovered doing original music. And that's what my focus was, really.
What kind of gear were you playing on at that time?
What kind of gear?
Yeah.
I had um, I had a no-name Telecaster. It was really a '68 Tele, but I took the fender neck off and put a Warmoth neck on it, and and so it didn't have a name for a while, but it was basically like a 3 pickup Telecaster with 3 Strat pickups, and that's the guitar I eventually ended up being on the first Hellicasters album.
Beautiful.
And it had EMG pickups on it too. So
I can relate to that.
Yeah, Ben's got a 67 right there with it was his dad's guitar with EMGs in it.
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well,
Yeah,
it's
I
great
like
beginnings.
EMGs, and what's that?
It's a great beginnings. You had great beginnings. You moved to an area where it was a vehicle for you to become proficient at your instrument and become a professional, like you said, out of necessity. But if you're going to do it anywhere, that was the place. Especially at that time, that was the place to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I always had this formula for any gig that would come along. I would give it the 3 F's.
Mm-hmm.
Fame, fortune, and fun. And usually you never had a gig where all 3 of them were happening. It was usually, well, you've got a band that's a lot of fun to play in, but you don't make any money, and you have 0 prospects of ever making it, getting fame from it or anything.
Sure.
But it's a lot of fun. And then there are other gigs like a bar band. You're kind of doing it for the money more than anything else. You're not going to get famous with it or anything. And so, when you run across a gig that has all 3 of the F's happening, then you're pretty happy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, so you're playing in bar bands. You're doing some originals. At what point did it change over and become more lucrative for you? And like, when did you meet up with the guys from the Hellicasters?
With like John and Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, I knew John and Jerry both from just playing around LA at the Palomino and all the showcase clubs, because they were in original bands too. And John, first time I saw John, he was playing a stand-up bass with this rockabilly band, and he was. I always thought he was a bass player. Then I saw him on guitar, and I was kind of blown away by that. And I thought, oh, he's more than just a bass player. and Jerry was he'd been in Los Angeles for a while, and I knew Jerry and I were at the Palomino Club, and they were having one of these things on Tuesday nights called Ronnie Mac's Barn Dance, and they would have groups come on, and they would just do like 3 or 4 songs, and we thought, we could do something like this, just hot dog around on guitar. And then he thought, well, we really should have a 3rd guy. And then we both kind of thought of Jorgensen, so we called him. He was touring with the Desert Rose Band at the time, so we juggled our schedules and finally played a gig at the Palomino for one of these barn dance things. And it was just meant to be a one-off kind of gig. but man, guitar players just came out of the woodwork to see us play for some reason.
Yeah.
And all the other bands I'd been in up till then, you're always working, trying to get people interested in your band. You're, calling people and trying to, just make it happen. But the
Yeah. Sure.
Hellicasters, it had this energy about it where things just landed in our lap, like we did that gig and it was so successful that we decided to do another one 6 months later. We did that. At the end of that gig, we got G&L wanted to do a full page ad with us and stuff.
Now, were you guys all using G&Ls at the time?
We didn't even, and this is before we had even a record deal or anything. So,
Wow.
The third or fourth gig, Michael Nesmith of the Monkees came out and he was saying, "Hey man, I really like you guys, and I'm starting this label called Pacific Arts Records. You want to be a part of it, And we said sure. And that's the way gigs kind of came to us, and it sort of rewrote the book in my head of what you got to do to make it. You can't. I now believe that whatever you're doing has its own kind of energy, and you have to keep doing what you believe is good and right, and good things will eventually come to those who are patient enough, So,
yeah. So
we were
those of you who don't know who Jerry and John are in the Hellicasters, it's John Jorgensen, who now plays with that guy from across the pond, that little guy Elton John, plays guitar and bass for Elton John.
Often,
Yep. And Jerry Donahue, which is, again, one of the best guitar players on the planet.
Forget about it.
So this little band called the Hellicasters with 3 acrobatic guitar players, I would imagine every guitar player from around the way would come and see you guys play at all times. It's amazing. It's like what a bill. Holy cow. Even as unknowns, I would imagine all the guitar players would have heard by ear and come and seen you play. And you'd get a good crowd as well. But let's get back to the guitar a little bit. When did you start with, you're a good guitar player. When did you start with the acrobatics, the slide playing with the finger playing and the G bender? How did that come about?
well, as soon as I moved to LA, Dave Borzoff, who owns Hip Shot, who started the company, he came out with the Hip Shot beat bender, and that's the first thing I saw other guitar players using, and I thought, man, I got to get me one of those. So I talked with him, and I ended up getting a few and just sticking them on the guitars. And at that point, I realized all these Clarence White licks I've been learning the hard way, thinking he's bending and stuff. I had no idea he was using a beat bender. So then I went back over some of those old records, and it just fit like a glove, the beat bender. And I thought, wow, this is really nice. I really understand how to use this thing. The slide rings, I've just always, I started experimenting with these back in the 70s, just trying to find a way that I could use a slide without it tying up my whole hand. Wanted to be able to use it on one finger and be able to chord I wear it on my middle finger, and that way I can chord with this finger and this finger in front and behind it. And so the right hand slide just came about partly being in the Hellicasters. It was almost a contest to see who could come up with the weirdest sounding stuff. and so and so you just kind of searched within your bag of tricks. All three of us did, and we kind of pushed the other two Hellicasters to be, their best. To really, we pushed the envelope, and we kind of, it wasn't competitive exactly. It was more, we were just three guys having a lot of fun and just seeing what are the boundaries of playing guitar and how can we push them even more. And that's kind of what we did,
Yeah. Yeah. So, as far as writing material for the Hellicasters, what was that process like? What would you go into the studio and write together, or would you write before you'd go into the studio? How long would it take you to write a song, and how long did it take you to write a record? Who came up with the material? Stuff like that.
Well, the first album, which I consider still to be our best, it's called, oddly enough, The Return of the Hellicasters. And that's our first album. And it was really basically our live show. And, when it came time to put the tracks down, it was fairly easy because we had played these songs and had them under our belts. What we would do prior to ever bringing in a new song, the three of us would meet over at my house and usually sit out on the patio with the three guitars, going through three little battery amps, and we would just start working harmonies out that way. If I brought in a new song, well, here's a new song, here's my melody, and then John and Jerry would just instinctively start working up some harmonies with it, and we would decide what to do with the songs, how to arrange it at that point, to make it be as dynamic and as powerful as it could be. And what we would do is, since all three of us had our own home studios, we would record the basics with a bass player and a drummer, and then have scratch guitar for John, myself, and Jerry. We would have our scratch parts, and then whoever song it was, while we were there in the studio, they would just have to overdub if need be to make sure their part was really solid that the others would harmonize against. You didn't work on solos then or anything. And so we would just, at the end of the recording day, we would, like the next day or something, bounce everything down to our different formats. Jerry and I both had Fostex 16-track machines, reel to reel, and we would bounce them onto that kind of format. John was recording with Elisa's ADAT machines, and he would bounce them down to his format.
Right.
Know? And then we would just work on our own parts, the solos especially, in the comfort of our own homes. And so we really hated to record in front of the other two, because they would they would always want to keep a take that you thought sucked and vice versa, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature of it, you know. And
Yeah, sure.
of having two other guitar players, you know, doing stuff. So uh, that's the way we did all three of our albums, you know.
Well, that's pretty incredible.
It's quite interesting. You figure, considering these days, what you're describing was taking place then was very forward thinking compared to basically everybody's recording like that now, right? You're handed a piece of music, you do your
Yeah.
part, and it gets forwarded off to someone else. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's nowadays, I don't know what people would do now. I mean, it's like every generation finds new ways of recording and stuff. And for us, we liked having the luxury of time on our side, so we could spend as much time as we wanted on our solos, and that would that would give us the best product in the end that we would be the proudest of individually, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
you know, sometimes we were always surprising each other with what the other guys would come up with, because we wouldn't really know what all three parts sounded like until it was time to mix, and then we would dump everything back onto 24 track 2-inch tape, and that's and it's a marvel to me, to technology, that we're even able to do all that with having it all sync up perfectly, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I'm still amazed at what we did with tape.
Right.
you ain't kidding. What I think is one of the coolest things about you and the Hellicasters is you have three guitar players, three very different guitar players that bond together and sound amazing, and you all have individual styles, individual signatures, individual sounds. You definitely know who's playing when they're playing. It's one of those things that it makes it that special. It's like, oh, you can hear your licks, you can hear Jerry's licks, you can hear John's licks, and you know, you don't necessarily, you know, you don't necessarily hear that all the time. It's, you know, it's very rare that you get three guitar players that have their own signature, let alone one. I mean, there are how many tons of guitar players that are good, that are making music that you can't tell who they are.
Right.
Yet if you hear a Hellicasters record, you know each one that's playing when they're playing. And so I think that's really special to have that all in one unit. Let alone three, you know, one guitar player. You have three players that you can actually tell who's playing. And that's just really special.
Well, thanks.
So you're welcome. You know, it's I mean, it's just, it is what it is. It's, you know, I'm just reporting the news. I'm not you know. Let's get to your signature guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So when did G&L approach you? What did they give you first, or how did they say we just going to give you a guitar? Is there anything that you like, or did they say what is your dream guitar and we'll make it for you? How'd that come about?
I'm having a hard time. You're kind of breaking up. Am I breaking up with you?
No,
guys?
you're not breaking up. But I'll say it again. When you
I'm
first
having a hard time understanding when you guys talk for some reason. Let me see if if I can. I don't know if it's.
Can you hear me now?
It's just that it, I do,
Will,
but I'm hearing like every other word or something.
all right, so what you do is you just drop out
like-
and come right back in. Can you drop out and come right back in?
Okay, so leave and come back.
Yes.
Okay, let me do that.
All right, so Will come right back. Ben, if you have any more questions for Will, please shoot. Don't wait for me. Just shoot away.
I'm just waiting for an opening. You know, if I hear more than 1.3 seconds of dead air, I'm on it. You know.
Okay, so I can always back off a little bit. That's not a
all
problem.
good. It's all
I
good.
just,
No,
I'm
like,
just thinking of things to say before I
you're
don't have
asking a
anything
bunch
to
of
say.
stuff that, yeah, and I'm like, well, Dave just asked it. Sure, you know. I'm curious. We'll need to find out what kind of amps he's been using.
That's a
Right?
great idea.
Because that's
Yeah.
just as important as the guitar is. I'm guessing there's not a lot going on between the guitar and the amp. You know, he's not going to have a
No.
NASA control center pedal board like, you know, I lean on as a
He
crutch.
doesn't. He
You know.
doesn't. He doesn't. If anything, he has a small delay unit, and I know he uses a ditto looper now. But
I'm
I
also
don't know.
curious,
I don't know exactly what he used back then.
He had a signature chorus pedal out for a while too, which I thought was interesting.
Well, we'll talk to him as soon as he comes back on. We'll
Yeah.
talk to him more about this stuff. Everyone in the chat, if you have any questions for Will at all, please ask them.
Ask away.
And we will we'll relay them to him. Let's see. Hey, Will, are you back? Can you hear us now?
Yeah, it sounds better
Okay.
now.
Okay.
So,
My question was, so when did G&L when they first came to you, what did they say? Did they offer you a guitar, or did they say what's your dream guitar and we'll make it? How did that come about? What was the first guitar they gave you? And tell us more about the G&L stuff.
well, to backtrack a little bit, the Fender was the first company that approached us, and this was in '95. They had approached the Hellicasters, and I was with John, and I were already with G&L. G&L had given me a few guitars, and I really liked their guitars, so I started using one of their ASATs, pretty regularly in the Hellicasters. But in '95, Fender really wanted us, and so we went with Fender, and we entered into a 5-year contract with them. And they said, yeah, we want to do signature guitars. And they started with doing the limited edition Japanese-made guitars and the Hellicaster edition. And mine was like a gold leaf designed Telecaster. And John and Jerry, their Hellicaster guitars, oddly enough, were both Strat based guitars. So anyway, so that was our first signature guitars. They did one on each of us. Then they said a couple of years later, well, we want to do custom shop signature models on each of you. So that's when I still like the gold leaf design, but I painted a few bodies and put gold leaf designs in certain patterns on them, and that kind of became my my custom shop one. I wanted my first guitar with Fender, the limited edition one. It had jazz master pickups in a telly, and um, I'd gone to, I knew Seymour Duncan from, playing and everything, and so I went to Seymour and said, I want you to help design the right jazz master pickup, and I gave him an ASAT special G&L pickup, and I said, this is the sound I want to get with this, because I really like, and I still like, G&L pickups. They just have a little bit more sizzle to them, and so that went into my Japanese guitar, those jazz master pickups Seymour Duncan made. And then when it came time to do the custom shop Telecaster for me, then I wanted a hum canceling kind of pickup. And so they had something they were working on, and it worked really good. I don't know what you call it, but it was the size of a jazz master pickup, partly because I remember Seymour Duncan telling me a long time ago, man, if I was going to put some pickups in a guitar, I would have them be jazz master type, because it has such a big cavity, it has a big housing that you're able to put a lot of different options for pickup design in there. And
yeah, sure.
So I always remembered that, and so that's how both of my signature model Fenders came about. When the 5-year contract was over, Jerry stayed with Fender, but John and we kind of missed our G&Ls, and so I started talking to G&L, and we talked about a signature model Z3 Telecaster type guitar, and that's how that came about.
Those Z pickups sound amazing.
That they do.
Z pickups. It was one of the last pickups Leo Fender designed, and it's what I like about them is they're hum canceling, they're reverse wound, but instead of being side by side or one coil on top of another to be more humbucking, these are they're not humbucking, they're hum canceling, and you still retain the high end sizzle that I like. Even on the neck pickup, you have a clarity that I just can't get with a humbucker pickup,
Right.
Yeah.
What has been your preferred amplifier over the years to play through?
My
preferred amplifier.
What?
What do you like to play through for an amplifier?
Well, when the Hellicasters were first touring, John ran into Mark Sampson back in his days with Desert Rose, and he talked Mark Sampson. Mark Sampson had been repairing all of his Vox amps, and he talked Mark Sampson into coming out and to LA, and he started Matchless, and the first tour, all three of us had Matchless amps.
Oh, wow.
That's got to be beautiful.
Class A 30-watt amps, and they're just great amps. So you get kind of spoiled on those amps pretty easy, and anything else that comes along, is you, you're going to have to settle for usually.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
that said, they're very, Class A amps run pretty hot, and so you have to be able to have other amps that you can rely on. And I remember at a gig we were doing in Reno, one of my matchless amps blew up, the one I was using, and they had a Rivera amp, and I started using that to finish out the gig. And that got back to Paul Rivera, and he said, "Hey, let me send you an amp, and you see what you think." So I started my relationship with him then, doing that,
Nice.
and just kind of one thing leads to another, sort of thing. And that's what I mean about with the Hellicasters. Things were so easy, things just kind of came to you because you were always kind of in the right place at the right time for things.
Yeah.
Does that
Sure.
make sense?
It
Yep.
does. Back then, it was all about the technical guitar player, and if you were proficient and had some good songs and you had a good shtick, usually the endorsements would come around. People wanted you to play their stuff, and that's that it was a little bit easier back then than it is now because
Yes.
it's
Yes,
a
you
very
have to-
different.
Nowadays, when you're in a high profile band, things like endorsements come pretty easy. When you're not in a high profile band, then they're more difficult sometimes. And like, for instance, I learned that there are different levels of endorsements. You can have a full endorsement where you get your gear for free.
And maybe even get paid
and-
to use it.
Yeah, people like, if you're Eric Clapton, not only do you get your free gear, but you also get paid a certain amount of money. And I've never gotten to the point where they were paying me like that. Most full endorsements, you get the gear for free, and there's usually a time limit on it, and and your part of the contract is you've got to be seen with it, photographed with their product a certain number of times, certain percentage of the time, like 40 or 50%,
Mm-hmm.
and but yeah, we had Spectra Flex. We had they made chords, and
I remember.
I still have just so many chords from that deal and I've never had one go bad. So I don't know.
Well, that's
They
good.
just really knew how to
Nice.
make good stuff too. And I've had we've had different string endorsements, but my favorite's always been GHS. I've been a GHS man since the 70s, and I've always liked their strings the best.
What gauge do you use? You use the boomers?
I like the Super Steels. They seem to be a little brighter for me, and I like a Telecaster, but I don't like typical Telecaster neck pickups. I like for there to be some spank in it, and so I would rather have a Strat type pickup in the neck position than to just have that normal chrome domed pickup, because that seems to cut out the high end all the time, and it just makes it really muddy sounding. So the Super Seals help me to get more of that high end kind of spank that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Very cool. So what gauge of strings do you use?
What kind of what?
What gauge strings do you use?
Hold on, I'm getting this thing situated. I like to use. I have kind of a custom gauge: 10, 12, 16 on the top, and then like 26, 32, and 46 on the bottom.
That's really cool. That's like a custom
So
nines and
it's
tens.
a combination of. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
That's very cool. Sounds more. It sounds like it would be more balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like having. I have a hard time with the low E all the time, trying to get it to be in tune. And I found the way that I play, because I don't bar chords conventionally. I use my thumb to wrap around the neck and everything. And I find for me, I have to slightly detune the guitar when I'm playing. Like I'll play, I'll detune the G slightly and the low E slightly, just so that it sounds more in tune. It's a little bit of a tempered tuning for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm the same way. Exact same way. Exact same way.
Yeah, I can understand that. You know, when you're using your thumb over the fretboard, you tend to muscle it a little bit. So I would imagine, you know, you'd go sharp if you're tuned to standard 440 at at 0. So yeah, I would see detuning the low E string a bit to get it in tune when you're playing it. That's cool. It's very good.
Yeah. So it's you just learn as you go, and what works and what doesn't. The other thing I learned about tuning is that you have to tune as where you're going to be playing. Like, there's no sense tuning sitting down when you're going to be standing up, because that changes the tuning slightly.
Right.
And so now, and when you're sitting, are you sitting up straight, or are you going to be slouching and leaning back? Because if you lean back, that's going to flatten out the neck a little bit. It's going to go a little sharper on some of the strings, not all of them. That's what makes it, crazy. So you learn how to do things like that, how to tune, so that you can sound good, no matter where you're playing. You just always got to tune whatever position you're going to be in.
Very true. Very true.
Sounds simple, but a lot of guys don't do that.
No, a lot of people don't. So when you were doing live gigs, when you were playing with the Hellicaster, did you go guitar cable directly into the amp, or did you have effects on the floor?
I missed part of that.
When you were playing with the Hellicasters, did you go from the guitar to the cable right to the amplifier, or did you have pedals on the floor? And if you had pedals, what did you use?
You mean, did it? You're kind of breaking up again. Are you saying did I go direct or go
Direct
to
from the
the amp?
guitar to the amp, or did you have pedals on the floor between the guitar and amp?
Yes, I have pedals, and um, generally in the Hellicasters I used like a CS3 compressor, and we all use tube screamers. And for some reason we got a really good deal at Manny's on these. At the time, there were these black tube screamers, TS5s they call them, and I think we each got like 5 or 10 of them, you know, and we because John had sat down in the studio one day and compared it with his TS808, and he discovered, wow, this is so close. The TS5s were so close to the TS808s that it's better to leave the 808 at home and just take the fives out on tour. So we all stocked up on those things. I also used a delay, like a DD3 Boss delay. And let's see, I also used a pitch shifter. And I used this device that gave me kind of a Leslie effect. I was heavily influenced by Danny Gatton, who played through a Leslie. And I had this, I think it was called a vibrato. It was a VB2.
Yeah, those things are amazing. I love that pedal. Love that pedal.
Yeah. And they go for a lot of money now, but they could be had back then for like, 40 or $50.
Yeah,
so
sure.
At one point, I probably had 4 or 5 of those, and but that with the pitch shifter, if I put the pitch shifter on octave, the high octave, that would give it a little bit more of an organy effect, when it went through the VB2, and then when we were with Matchless, we had reverb units, Boss reverb units, all 3 of us, and then once I went to Rivera, I liked the reverb that was built into the amp, so I quit using my reverb. Didn't need my reverb pedal anymore. So, but pretty much it. We like to set our sound, like at sound check. We would just try to get the best, cleanest sound we could, just going into the amp, bypass, not having any pedals on. And then we would use the pedals to give us different shades of distortion and stuff like that.
Nice.
It wasn't, we didn't, in other words, none of us liked to use amp distortion, because it just, for some reason, it would not cut through. The other 2 guys would bury you, they would bury you in the mix, because if you get a good clean signal and then, you get it to where it's at a good volume, which is pretty loud. And then you just add a little hint of distortion when you need some, or a lot of distortion, like Jorgensen, if he needed the guitar to really sustain, he would have 2 tube screamers on.
Wow.
one after the other, and so that's a trick I learned from him is, and we kind of learn from each other, and that's the beauty of being in a band, a 3-guitar band, is that you got a lot of people that you can learn from.
Sure.
And they know a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
true.
Well, the three in that band knew a lot of stuff, right? So Terry3Gs says, by the way, thank you, Mr. Ray. I have loved I have loved reading your articles on Premier Guitar. See them here. He actually put a link down in the chat for Sleeper Guitars and Mods.
Nice.
He put
What did you say about the link?
he put it in the chat for people to read.
Put what in the video?
Well, we like I said earlier, we have a chat of people that are watching us live. So he said he texted to thank you. He loved reading all your articles in Premier Guitar, and then within that he wrote the link to one of your articles for people to read.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So,
Let's see what else. Ben, anything else, brother?
Yeah. When I was doing research, Will, did I see you had a signature chorus pedal for a period of time?
you kind of broke up. Say again.
Did you release a signature chorus pedal at one time?
Do I have a signature what?
Chorus pedal.
Chorus? Yes. Yes. Sorry about. I'm just having a hard time. It's breaking up on my end quite a bit. BBE owns G&L guitars, by the way, and so they came to me years ago wanting to do a pedal, and so I had a kind of chorusy vibrato pedal that I did with them, and it was kind of fun. I used it for many years. It was it's funny. It's like my quest to sound like an organ has finally kind of led me to this. The pedal that I love the most now is just the Electro-Harmonix organ pedal,
Right.
like the B9, and all the other pedals I've been using before in my life was always trying to emulate the sound of like a B3 organ, and the Electro-Harmonix pedal really nails it, and
Yes, they do.
I like being able to. I just like being able to switch over to playing organ pads while another guitar player solos or something. Just gives a nice new texture to the music.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep.
So in the chat, Jeff K says, when the world can go back out, will you ever do clinics again? And he also says he loves this song called Santa Cruzin'.
Yeah, I like Santa Cruz, and I like going to Santa Cruz. That was one of my favorite cities, and I wrote that song for my Mojo Blues album called Santa Cruz, and then it's just taught the fun of going to a fun city where people are just wanting to have fun, and it's so non-COVID like, it's
Yeah,
today's standards. It's,
you ain't kidding.
COVID has just become such a it's redefining how life is in America, and I'll be glad when it's just a footnote in history again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any guitars you'd like to show us before we start talking about some of your cigar box guitars? Do you have anything near
Say
you?
again.
Do you have any guitars that you'd like to show us before we start talking about some cigar box guitars?
I've got. Let me show you. Let me go grab a guitar here. This is one of my signature G&L guitars, and it's got the 3 Z coils. This is something Mac Whiteside made, for me.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I like it. It's got the skull fingerboard markers and everything, and I'm kind of rediscovering a lot of my guitars again. I have so many, and it's nice to just dust some of them off and go, I haven't played this in a while. I think this will be my new favorite guitar for a while.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah.
I still like cheap guitars, and I usually buy about a guitar a month.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they're cheap guitars, Cozarts or King guitars or something, just because I love being able to take a real pedestrian kind of guitar and make it into something special that I can enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that with most guitars that I buy. I'll put a hip shot B bender on it, and so my designation now for guitars includes if it's hip shot ready or not. If it's hip shot ready, that means it's already had a hip shot on it, so there's no new drilling that needs to be done or anything, and it's pretty easy to slap a hip shot on and be ready to go in about 15 minutes, with it.
Sure.
And I like being able to do that, and I just love gear. That motivates me.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
guys know how it is. It's like
Sure
you
do.
get a new
Sure.
guitar, and it's like, wow, it's your favorite instrument for a while. And
Yep.
that's the way I am.
So Charles Green in the chat says, "What year is that guitar? And could you show it up close one more time, please? He'd like to see it."
This guitar,
Yes.
this is let me see. I received it in '09, so it's a 2009 model. And Mac, one thing Mac does is he spray paints the F holes black.
Mm-hmm.
Then he burned in. He made a brand for me, and he brands a lot of my guitars in the upper bout with WR, which
Yeah,
is my
that's
brand.
fantastic.
And and he takes a torch to guitars, and so he's a welder by trade, and so he takes a welding torch and he goes over it and he creates kind of an
burnt
aged
look.
to
Yeah.
it by doing that, and he's very talented. you know
That's
And
pretty amazing.
I would have I had GNL send him parts, and he would just kind of put together guitars for me and do it his way, and I always liked them better. They always felt better, and it was just fun.
That's great. So do you still have the guitar that I wanted from you?
Do I still have the what?
That guitar that I wanted, the Silver Sparkle.
The first?
The Silver
I'm sorry,
Sparkle
what?
ASAT. Do you
Sparkle
know the
ASAP.
Yeah, the Silver Sparkle, the one from the ad.
Oh, that was in the GNL ad.
Yeah.
You talking about that
Yep.
Sparkle? Nope, lost that one in the divorce.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That
I
happened.
had a divorce about 5 years ago, and I lost a lot of good guitars with that. But that was
I think
that was
that's
a
the
pretty
leading
sweet
cause
one.
of guitar departure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a shame. Well, it's okay. It's okay. I'm sure you've got a lot of nice ones.
hmm
So let's talk
Yeah.
about the cigar box guitars. Do you have any of those that you could show?
Well, it's funny, but about a year ago, it's like someone flicked the switch, and I was no longer into cigar box guitars anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had collected about 60 of them, and 40 of them I would say were battle ready. They could
Mm-hmm.
You could walk out on stage with them. They were all, for the most part, 6-string guitars, electric guitars with pickups, and because they're kind of one of a kind, you get a certain kind of individual sound out of them that you won't get from a factory-made guitar. There's a lot of the builder inside the build of a cigar box guitar, but for some reason I had a real interest in them for about 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up one day and was like, I think I want to play some of my GNLs again.
Yeah.
And that's where I've been ever since. So yeah,
Well, there's
I used
nothing
to be
wrong with
into
that.
cigar box
Mhm.
guitars, and just not into it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that at all. Your G&L guitars are amazing.
Yeah, it's all about having fun to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very true.
And I'd love to get out after all this is said and done and go out and watch you play again. Maybe sit up there and play a song with you.
Yeah, and someday when the whole COVID thing is over, we'll hopefully life will get back to normal again.
Yeah.
So
So
true.
do you have anything to tell the chat? Any words of wisdom to tell the chat about playing guitar, having fun playing the guitar? Anything that you wish to impart on the chat?
Well, my words of wisdom, I guess my words of wisdom would be for young people to figure out how they're going to make music and have it be something they can make money with. Because to me, there's been a devaluation of music over the years. And I think we've lost a whole generation of kids that will never buy music again. It's like they know how to stream it for free or download it for free. And so the musicians coming up today, they've got to figure out how they can make a living with this. And they're going to have to come up with something, some way that makes people feel like music is valuable again, because right now it's lost its value because it's so plentiful out there. And
Right.
that's going to be the hardest thing for musicians coming along now, is figuring out how can I do this for a living and make a good living at it. And it's becoming more challenging as time goes. And I think young people will figure something out. I don't know what it will be, but
I think the internet needs to
they've
break.
got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Will, on behalf of Ben and myself, I really want to thank you for joining us and giving us your time and imparting, your life on us. And you've been a friend of mine for a very long time. I personally appreciate you being here with us and taking the time. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys, and thanks for having a show that appeals to so many guitar players out there. And because the bottom line is, it's all about fun. And
Yes.
that's why
It is
we
all
do
about
this.
fun.
That's why
Absolutely.
the three of us do this. It's just fun.
Sure.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to remind yourself that it's fun.
Isn't that the truth?
Very much so.
Well, Ben, you have anything to say in closing?
Yeah, the only downside of tonight is Will has cost me some money because I now have to buy a hip shot B bender. Thanks, Will. I now need to get a hip shot B bender because you've been talking them up so much. I have to get one for one of my tellies. So this has been a real treat.
Thank you,
Pleasure to
guys.
meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. I'll be talking to you in the next few days. I'll give you a holler, and we'll reminisce over this a bit. And Ben, thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
Everybody,
I'm sorry. I'm so tech challenged.
oh, don't worry.
Finally could figure something out.
It's not gonna be. It's gonna look real good on YouTube. So don't worry. It's gonna look seamless. Everything will be fine. Everyone, if you're looking for this week's Guitar of the Week from me, it will be out. I'm having a little trouble with the editing on this particular show, but I'll get it out soon. I'll see you again next Tuesday on Guitar of the Week, and we will see you next Thursday.
Wednesday.
I'm sorry, Wednesday, not Thursday. We'll see you next Wednesday. And Ty will be back with us on Wednesday. I hope he's having a great time this weekend playing gigs. Lucky bastard he is.
So jealous.
And we will leave you with this. Good night.